welcome you to the Penthouse Suite interviews. This year we're doing things just a little bit differently. We are doing it remotely. The entire conference is remote for obvious reasons, and we're doing it via a Zoom session. And we want to thank you for being willing to participate and be involved in this year's version of the Penthouse Suite interviews.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. The Penthouse Suite interviews have been one of my favorites for years, so I'm honored to be able to take part.
Well, we're delighted to have you. This conference, your panel, you're going to be doing one of the Neapolitan panels, and your panel program at the conference is entitled Finding the Balance, Optimizing Privacy, Data Security, and Personalization. Can you talk about the interplay among these three key concerns and as they relate to the library and the information industry? How do they actually impact one another?
Yeah, this is an issue that's become, more and more central, I think, mainly during the past 5 years when there's been greater attention to things like data breaches and ransomware and crazy things like that. I think, ultimately it comes down to a space where there are many stakeholders and each are kind of operating with different goals in mind. And how do you find, that sweet spot in the middle where it's like a healthy relationship between all the stakeholders, as well as a situation where there's both a value for investment and also a feeling of like security around personal information. So that pendulum, I think, has swung several times, over recent years, either in a reactive manner due to something that's happened that's hit the news, or in a proactive manner. The GDPR provisions coming out over in Europe, or the California laws, really trying to take, that big step. And then, of course, the publishers and the different service providers racing to really catch up. I think that we also see society trends around each one of these issues, as well as more and more of a sense on the part of different end users that things should be simple, things should be easy, that the products that we use in the information space behave like consumer products. So that's an awful lot, on the plates of the libraries, and the publishers to try to get a handle on.
Yeah, I think we've been spoiled by the Amazons and the Googles of the world. There's no doubt about that. Now, some people think, though, that users might have to give up some privacy to get the personalization in services that they want. What's your take on it? And are there ways to enhance personalization for users while protecting their privacy and their data?
Yeah, I personally do a lot of research and interact with a lot of platforms in the space, and I feel sometimes on the fence about sharing data for personalization. Sometimes I feel that we're not quite there. And when I say we, I come from the publisher and vendor space. So I'll say that the publishers and vendors are not quite there when it comes to the personalization that the end users really want at the end of the day. I'm happy to let the services that I use know more about me if that will indeed steer me to things or proactively let me know about things that are going to be genuinely useful to me in the things that I'm researching. But I'm not sure that's what I see happening. It more is just, I feel like I might be spammed all the time. I'm sure there are other folks out there that can kind of relate to that as well. I do think that researchers can articulate the types of things that will be genuinely useful to them, as well as, in the publisher, in the vendor space, being able to match up articles with peer reviewers in a really accurate manner, knowing from the library side more about what what patrons are actually doing, with content and services. So I think that there is a goal there that we should be working towards. And maybe we've just been, a little bit hesitant, based on the experiences of the past. I think everybody probably has an experience of like that pair of socks that followed them around the internet. And more recently, probably there was a funny hat with a shield on it to protect you from COVID that followed me around. And it was days and days of being reminded about being in a situation like that. So I think it is possible to do that, but it's something that we probably need to look at a lot more comprehensively and decide, again, with input from the researchers and the students and faculty, what is it that will be genuinely useful in terms of personalization.
Yeah, it's very much a work in progress, I think. So what do you think are the most effective strategies, though, that are being used by today's libraries to protect the privacy and the data security of their users? And what about on the publishing side of the equation? And what impacts do these efforts have on offering more personalization to users?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the work that's being done around privacy policies. So when we're fortunate to have Lisa Hinchliff and Mimi Coulter joining us for the Neapolitan, that's definitely something that I want to talk to them about. I think libraries, universities, publishers have all had privacy policies, but there hasn't been, I think, a level of attention to see what those policies are addressing, how those policies are implemented. It would be wonderful for there to be a development of a model license that different players in the space could utilize and could adapt to their specific purposes. I understand that that's something that Lisa's been working on lately with grants, and so that's bound to come up more. I think it's very important that all of the license relationships be examined. Certainly in the library space, there are many third-party applications that once you move from maybe a directly negotiated product with a vendor out into some third-party applications on their site, then it might feel like you're in a little bit in a anything goes type space. And there may be data that those third-party vendors are collecting that is not shared back with the libraries. And I think that's something where we need, more transparency. We need to be, a little bit more on an even playing field. The privacy laws, that I mentioned, kind of dragged the publishers. I don't want to quite say kicking and screaming, but at least maybe worrying a little bit, into this new space. But I do think, having worked on those, becoming compliant with those, that it's a better scenario than we were in before. And probably you've noticed as well when you sign up for services or when you register for an event, probably when we register for Charleston as well, there are stricter opt-in policies. There's more transparency on what data may be used for. On the publishing side, one of the things that I'm watching eagerly is the Seamless Access initiative. This is a project to enable more ready access for folks who are not on campus, which, as you know, is a situation where many, many people find themselves right now. And certainly libraries want to ensure that faculty, staff, and students have access to content that has been provided to them through the library's efforts. So we don't want people to get stuck in sort of log on and authentication loops or be denied access to something that they should have access to. This has been a long running interest for me. I was involved in a NISO working group around single sign-on back in 2008, 2009 era, back in dinosaur days, espresso. And so I was really excited when what was for a while called RA21 and what has now been deemed seamless access came along, that they actually looked back at some of the espresso recommendations that we made in the space. So I think there are a lot of good faith efforts to try to get a handle on privacy, ease of access, more transparency, and I think things are going to continue to move in the right direction over the next coming years.
I think one of the real benefits of your panel is having the capability of updating people on where things are in terms of both the library side and the publishing side.
Yeah, quickly moving space, that's for sure.
That's exactly, no doubt. From the user perspective, user expectations are changing. How does the current college generation view questions around privacy in their data from you? What's your take on that?
Well, first I have to say I am no longer a college student, but I do have a college student in my home. I don't want to generalize, too much, from his sentiment or his experience, but from what I hear, there's both this sense that college students today have lived so much of their lives in public, and so many of the tools and services that they use, reveal personal aspects of their life, that it's not something that concerns them. That's sort of kind of one view. But on the other hand, this is a generation that has grown up being aware of things like data breaches, being aware of bad behavior that can happen online with, trolling and revealing of people's private information, and the like. And so I think that from, my son and his colleagues, his cohort, that there is more of a take charge attitude around their own data, and a more discriminating nature of the kinds of things that they're willing to sign up for. So I think as we try to balance this tension between what we see as the scholarly communication space and what we see as sort of social media, there's a crossover that's happening. And I think that maybe the advantageous aspects from both sides can be combined. And I really look to the younger generations to kind of lead the charge on this.
Well, from what you're saying, it sounds like they have a real awareness of what their data is and what it means. And in some ways, I got the sense they have a sense of ownership that it's their data and they should have some responsibility or should have some say in how it's being used.
Yeah, we've all heard, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So this is definitely something that I believe they've grown up with. And so they've just kind of internalized it to the point where those of us who came to these types of activities, a little bit later on in our careers or in our lives, had to kind of ponder a bit, or maybe we were in it before we had an opportunity to ponder it. So I just think their life experience really informs their attitudes, and they're not going to just tolerate what they think might be a misuse of information on the part of companies.
It's getting more specific about data analytics. It's a tool that's currently being used by both libraries and publishers to enhance the user experience. Can you point to some specific ways that's actually happening?
Yeah, this is a question that comes, close to the question about personalization, I think, but, has the potential for going further. I have had the opportunity over the years to work on numerous pre-conferences at Charleston, and we've brought librarians in, who were talking about these issues, librarians and vendors as well. And I know there have been a lot of pilots around textbook use cases. I know Cengage was engaged in some pilots, I think, with the University of Michigan for a while. And so you do see, kind of smaller experiments happening. One of the things that I'm most excited about was a project that I believe Doreen Bradley, also of University of Michigan, mentioned at a privacy session that we held last year. And this was around some scholarship students on their campus. And the library wanted to see if there was a correlation between student success and use of the library. And what I gather now, unlike when I was a student, you scan into the library with your cards, you're checking out things that at least for a while are tabulated until you return them. And I know that they gleaned some important information, and they were able to make a determination with the scholarship program about how they could better intervene earlier with those scholarship students to ensure success. I think there was another project that came up. I'm not 100% sure who mentioned it last year, but around faculty success in applying for grants, and whether prior to those grant applications, library resources and librarians had been utilized in putting that together. So I think there's a lot of potential to study specific segments on campus, and to try to tie or correlate that to library resources. I think it'll be fascinating to see some of these studies come out.
To drill down a little deeper in that, in your program abstract, you specifically mention that your panel will explore how data analytics is being used to improve student success. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that and tell us how you see that actually happening.
Yeah, I think that the scholarship program, that I mentioned from last year, is a great example for that. I think there have long been initiatives through libraries to provide discipline-specific support for different courses and different majors. It's something that I know that I went through back when I was in graduate school for history. And now there's an opportunity to, connect specific resource uses, connect, maybe appointments or reference questions that come in, and to combine that data from the library side with other data that may be collected through database use, through use of other resources on campus, and to really get a more comprehensive picture about how things come together. I think a lot of data on campus, similar to what's happening in other organizations, has been really siloed. When you have proprietary systems that don't talk to each other, it may be difficult or impossible to get that data out and combine it with other data. I think there's more interest and adamant calls from campus that those types of things be possible. In the researcher space, so if we're talking about graduate students, postdocs, folks who are working in the lab, I know that there are, with new identifiers like funder identifiers or grant IDs, those are the kinds of things that can demonstrate impact. So beyond the classroom, even on into societal benefit, I think there's a lot of potential for data use.
Yeah, I agree. I think the ability to cross-talk and discuss the data, or at least feed data back and forth, and develop some positive profiling of students and what their needs are would be helpful. You mentioned the reference services. That's something that I did for a number of years, and having a better sense of what students really need would have helped us out a great deal. Previously, Heather, and this is more on a personal level, you shared with us about a really wonderful project that you set up through the PubHub platform for COVID memorials, allowing an open online space to share memories and photos of loved ones. Can you tell us about that and share some of the background of how it actually came about?
Sure. I was working at the Knowledge Futures Group last spring when COVID really hit the Northeast quite hard. New York City, I think everyone heard about, but Shoreline, Connecticut does have a number of folks who commute into the city on a regular basis. And so Connecticut was hit hard at the time. And I remember thinking, what could I do to contribute? I'm not a first responder. I don't cook, so feeding the hungry was not going to be necessarily a good path forward for me. But I thought, well, I have access to a free hosting platform, which is the PubPub platform, which is a open source and free tool that anyone can use to make a community. And I had heard that at the height of the tragedy in the spring of the first wave, there were folks who could not even get obituaries published in the paper because there simply wasn't enough room to accommodate everyone who wanted to have their loved one remembered. So I used the PubPub platform, which is designed around creation of communities, to put together a site where folks could add remembrances of their loved ones without, I think, some of the strict limits that the online funeral services permit. So unlimited, space for text, unlimited images, you could put videos up. So if anyone wants to go and take a look at it, it's actually called Behind the Numbers. So if you look at all one word, behind the numbers .pubpub, .org, you can see what I have so far. I made example profiles for my grandparents, paternal and maternal. They did pass away some time ago, so their deaths were not COVID related, but I wanted to show some possibilities, what the platform could be used to do, and created instructions. And I do have, as of the summer, I have a participant, a former colleague who unfortunately lost her mother this summer to COVID-19. It's not a need that's going to go away. And I think when I first created it in the spring, it was still very raw for people. A lot of folks were maybe not quite ready to take that step, but I would certainly be happy to help anyone who wants to create a remembrance of a friend, of a relative, of a neighbor. Just get in touch with me. If you don't feel tech savvy to try to do it yourself, get in touch with me, and I'm happy to work on that. And it's just, a one way to feel like you contribute. Everybody has, unique skills and talents that they could put in. And if this brings comfort even to one person or one family, then I'll feel like it was time well spent.
What a fantastic use of technology. That's just wonderful. And that's so generous on your part to do this and to make it available to people. And I know it has to be a comfort to the people who have suffered such loss. So thank you very much for doing that, for being so thoughtful and kind and considerate. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah. Let me ask you. Let me end just by saying: is there a question that I should have asked that I didn't? Have we missed anything?
I would just say that privacy is one of these issues that's never going to be done, and so that might seem very daunting. I mentioned, students working, back in the days when I was around, and, privacy was different then. There's different expectations around privacy on campus. I didn't realize until my son started college that you use your key card to get into your room as well as your dorm and all of the buildings on campus. And so that's something that, I might have felt a little bit cringeworthy back in my day, but the students, they're used to that now. So as new technologies come on board, as new user expectations grow, it will never be done. It will be something that we will continually need to adjust. And so we're fortunate to have folks like Mimi and Lisa kind of on the front lines of the library side, as well as a lot of folks, in the publisher and vendor space, who will dedicate themselves to making sure that we can continually, refresh our attention to that. So I don't think it's a topic that will go out of style anytime soon.
Well, I totally agree, and I'm really looking forward to the panel. Just speaking to you today has really increased. I was very interested to start off with, but talking to you has really increased my interest. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Thank you.